Hi, thanks for tuning in today. I'm going to be doing a review of the English majority text version. Reviewer has requested that I do a review of that, and I think it's a very interesting translation, and so let's jump right into it. Okay, so a few disclaimers. I don't claim to be an expert on Koine or Koine Greek. I'm learning and growing in my knowledge of Koine Greek, but there's a number of good viewers that are gracious enough to watch this channel that are really proficient in the language. So if I make any errors or mistakes in my in the way that I approach this, and somebody sees that, feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know where maybe I've made a mistake. I do know enough Greek to start that I've started reading through the Greek New Testament, and I've been using a program called Master New Testament Greek. Now, any mistakes that I make is no reflection on that program, but I just want to tell you, if you're interested in learning Biblical Greek, it's a great thing to do. I'll leave a link for it down below. I did a review of it as well. But like I said, I just wanted you I don't want to pretend to be something I'm not. I'm someone who's growing and learning Biblical Greek enough that I can do somewhat of an evaluation between someone's translation and the Greek text itself. So I just want to share with you what I'm learning and where I'm growing in. Another thing I want to tell you about is that I have not read this translation from Matthew to Revelation. There may be things in it and things I don't know about which may be good or may be bad. I've done some comparisons to kind of get a sense and feel for how the translation works, how it flows, and sort of the translation philosophy, but I have not read it all the way from Matthew to Revelation, so there may be something in there that's really good, or maybe something in there that's really bad that I'm just not aware of. So just wanted to issue a couple of those disclaimers and share those with you. But now let's kind of jump right into the review itself, and I'm going to review this in 5 different categories. I'm going to display those on the screen right now. So we'll first talk about the underlying Greek text, the translation philosophy, then single-person translations. We'll do some comparisons between itself and the Greek text, and I'll give you some overall impressions. Okay, let's talk about the underlying Greek text. This is one of the few translations that's available that is a translation of the Byzantine majority text. It is not a translation of the Textus Receptus, and this is very important to understand that in modern discussions and textual criticism, these things are not considered the same thing. The majority text and the Textus Receptus are 2 different things. I can display a quote for you from a recent book on textual criticism, mainstream book by experts in the field. They clearly distinguish. Now, on a popular level, it's been very common for people to use these terms interchangeably, but that's really a mistake. I mean, there are some examples of some fairly major differences. 1 John 5:7, for example, where it talks about the 3 witnesses that are in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, I believe is how it's worded, and these 3 are one. That's something that's in the Textus Receptus. It is not in the Byzantine majority text. There's some 1,800 differences between these 2 editions. Now, what I want to tell you, my position on the Byzantine priority or majority text theory, it's something that I'm very interested in, but it's not anything that I have made a definitive conclusion that I know for sure that it's better than some of the critical texts that are out there. It's something that I'm currently researching and studying, and I'm very, very interested in, but I haven't really picked a camp to be in terms of textual criticism. So just wanted to put that out there. So just to be very clear, this translation is not a translation of something like that's based on the Nestle Aland text or Tyndale Greek New Testament or anything like that. This is something that has relied on 3 editions. One is the one I'm holding in my hand. It's the Robinson and Pierpont text. Sometimes I've called that Pierpoint, I don't know why. And the Hodges and Farstad text, which I have over here on my table, which you can't see. And over there, I have the edition of Wilbur Pickering's Family 35. So you've relied on these 3 editions to do this translation. It's not a TR translation. It's not a critical text translation. It's one of the few translations that's available, complete translation of the Byzantine majority text view. If you find Byzantine priority convincing, you're going to find this translation important to probably look at and consider. Now let me talk a little bit about the translation philosophy. And we're going to get into this a little bit when I compare the Greek text itself and his translation. But his translation philosophy, as far as I can tell, is one of formal equivalence. That is, he tries very closely, how should I say that? He tries very carefully to follow the Greek text very closely. In other words, it's more of a word-for-word translation than it is a dynamic equivalent translation. So I've invited the translator, Pastor Paul Esposito, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, on this channel, if he'd like to do an interview with me. If he wants to correct any of my misunderstandings or anything like that, we'd do an interview and just kind of talk through his translation philosophy. And he's expressed a little bit of interest in that. I realize this is sort of a small channel and he has to steward his time wisely as a busy pastor, I'm sure. But Pastor, if you're interested in doing that, be happy to have you on. So just extending the invitation again there. So let me talk also just briefly about single-person translations. This is a single-person translation. It is not done by committee. Some of the advantages to that is that in a single-person translation, you have a consistent biblical outlook that's being displayed there. In other words, sometimes on a committee you can have conservatives and you can have liberals, and the liberals will pull the text one way and the conservatives will pull the text the other way, and they make compromises, and there's lots of things that can happen in a translation that's done by committee. Whereas in a single person translation, you can go on the majority text, majoritytext.com, and you can read Pastor Esposito's statement of faith. You know exactly where he's coming from. So sometimes in a committee, you don't know where some of the people have been coming from. You don't know who influenced that text. Here, you know consistently who's translated it. He has one outlook. And so that's one of the advantages. One of the disadvantages to single-person translations are that, if a person has any kind of bias, that's not corrected by the committee. If a person is, wants to lean one way on a particular text or influence a text, and we all have biases. Let's not have any confusion about that. We all have things that kind of bias us one way or another. We all have doctrinal views, and those are going to influence how we translate. It's just going to happen. So there's some advantages and disadvantages to single-person translations, but this is a single-person translation. If Pastor Esposito comes on and we do an interview of him, I would like to ask him that question and ask, did he have anybody maybe reviewing the translation as he was working through it, or how he tried to kind of cope with the idea that single-person translations can sometimes bias a translation in one direction or another. Now, I'm not claiming anything in particular on this translation. I'm just speaking in general terms. Now, there have been some excellent single-person translations. Think of William Tyndale. Think of Martin Luther, who produced translations that influence thousands and millions. And Tyndale's Tyndale's translation of the Bible influenced 90% of the New Testament in the King James Version by some counts. And that's influenced generations and generations of Christians. So there are excellent single-person translations that have been done, but we just have to be aware that sometimes single-person translations can have some of these disadvantages. Okay, so let's take a look and go into the Greek text and his English translation, just make a few comparisons so you can kind of see how closely he's hugged the Greek text itself. Okay, let's make some comparisons between his translation and the actual Greek text itself. I will go ahead and show you my computer screen here. His website, and he's graciously provided his translation online. And we'll open up, let's go to Galatians, and just kind of compare it to the Greek text itself. So we want to start in 1. Paul, apostle, not from men, neither through man, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father, the one raising him from the dead. It's real similar to what he's got. Paul, an apostle, not from men, nor through man, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father, who raised him from the dead. Okay, let's just skip down to verse 6, see how he's handled that one. Let me actually zoom in there so you can see his translation a little bit better. Paul says in verse 6, I marvel that so quickly you turned, that's you plural, from the one calling you in the grace of Christ into another gospel. See how he did that? I marvel that you are turning so quickly from him who called you in the grace of Christ to a different gospel. And he's done that. You are turning. He's translated that very literally there, and I think that's a good way to handle that. And I'm just kind of translating these on the fly, so bear with me here a little bit. Verse 8. But even if we or an angel from heaven proclaims to you from that we preach to you, anathema let him be. So verse 8, his translation, but even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel to you other than that we preach to you, let him be accursed. Now that's a great way to handle that. And when it says should preach a gospel, he's really brought out this word right here, because that's kind of hard to bring out fully in English. You can say preach, but it doesn't bring out the fact that this is actually gospelizing. You're actually proclaiming the good news. So the way he's done that is he's brought that out, should preach a gospel. Okay? We can look at verse 11. But I made known to you, brothers, the gospel that was proclaimed by me, that not is according to men. It's verse 11. And then, but I make known to you, brothers, the gospel preached by me is not according to men. That's a good way to render that. What he's done is, as I suspected, he's stayed very close to the original text here, so it's a very formal translation. I think he's handled the verses that we've looked at very well, and so we could go into a lot more verses. We could look at a lot more. I'll just pick up another random one and just kind of see how he's handled it here in Galatians. Let's go to Galatians 2:11. But I made known to you, brothers, we already did that one, didn't we? That's 1:11. Then we go down to 2:11 on my other screen. But when Peter came into Antioch, against face to him I withstood, or I withstood him to his face, because he was blameworthy. Then verse 11. But when Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he was to be blamed. Now, that's a great way. Like I said, this is a very close rendering of the Greek as far as I can tell. I haven't read through the whole thing, but just kind of making some of the comparisons that I have, I think he's done a very good job holding closely to the Greek, and so I think it seems to be a very good translation of the Byzantine text. So, what is my overall impression? My overall impression, like I said, I haven't read this from Matthew to Revelation. I'm a little bit limited there. But my overall impression is this is a good single-person translation. I think it would be a wonderful reference, something to compare to. I'm not sure I would want to use it as my primary translation. And the reason being is, there's actually two reasons. One is because it's just not widely used, right? If you started using this from the pulpit, hardly anybody in your congregation is going to be able to get their hands on it. And number two, I do have some reservations about single-person translations. But I think if you like Byzantine priority, if you're interested in Byzantine priority, this would be a great reference tool for you. So I'm going to say go for it. Take a look at this. Dive into it. It seems to me to be, as far as I can tell, a fairly reliable translation. I haven't seen any issues in it, but I've taken a limited sample of it. But overall, from what I can see, I'm pretty impressed with it. So I just want to welcome all our new subscribers. I want to thank everybody that's been liking these videos, and just kind of welcome you to join the dialogue. Put some comments down below. Tell me what you think about this. What do you think of Byzantine priority? What do you think about this translation? Anything that you have, just kind of, we're building a community of people who are interested in studying the scriptures, looking at the Greek text, and just like Bible reviews. So welcome everyone, and thanks for watching.